to determine the interval of convergence for this function, what we need to realize is that this series here is actually a geometric series. It is a geometric series in disguise. So using algebra, we're going to transform the an part. Remember, this is an. We're going to transform that to look like r to the n, so that this series looks like this, a geometric series. So let's see, -1 to the n over 2 to the n times x minus 2 to the n. Now you can think of this as over 1, and so then now we're doing fraction multiplication. So we have -1 to the n times x minus 2 to the n over 2 to the n. Next, what we'll do is we'll write this as -1 times x minus 2 to the n over 2 to the n. Now you might be saying, how did I do that? So remember, we have this exponent rule. Let's see, how about, let's say c times d. C and d are just numbers. C times d to the n is equal to c to the n times d to the n. And so I went this direction, right, where c was -1 and d was x minus 2. Now distributing this -1 through, we get -x plus 2 to the n over 2 to the n. And remember that -x plus 2 is 2 minus x. So I'll write it like that. And now, lastly, I'll write this as 2 minus x over 2 to the n. And again, you might be saying, hey, how did you do that? So remember that we have this exponent rule. Let's see, c over d to the n is equal to c to the n over d to the n. And again, we started on the right-hand side here and went that way. This time with c being 2 minus x and d being 2. So what all this shows us is that really f of x can be written as two to the n. And this is in fact a geometric series. Geometric series with ratio r equal to 2 minus x over 2. Remember that a geometric series converges when r is between 1 and -1. Well, what's r? R is 2 minus x over 2. So multiplying both sides by 2, we get -2 is less than 2 minus x is less than 2. Let's see, subtracting 2 from both sides, subtracting 2, subtracting 2. Let's see, we've got -4 is less than -x is less than 0. And now remember, we want to get this in terms of just x. Now, to get x by itself, we want to divide by -1. And so the thing to remember is that when you multiply or divide by a negative, you got to switch the signs when you're using inequalities. So multiplying everything, both sides by -1, we get 4, switch the sign, x, switch the sign, 0. Now this is obviously a little confusing, Thinking of it like this, so I'll put it like this. And now let's see, the alligator mouth is opening towards the x from the 0, so that means it's like that. And the alligator mouth is opening towards the 4 from the x, so that looks like that. And that's actually how I do it. I'm not trying to be silly or anything like that. Keeping these inequalities straight and all that sort of stuff there's a lot going on, so I just use the alligator mouth analogy, the one that I learned in grade school. So my interval of convergence is 0, 4. And that is the answer.